The fluorescent lights in the Denver Courthouse Victim Services office buzzed overhead, like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across 12-year-old Emma Martinez's pale face. She sat rigidly in an uncomfortable plastic chair, her small hands clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned white. Beside her, a magnificent golden retriever named Justice lay perfectly still, his intelligent brown eyes watching her every micro-expression. With the trained intensity of a therapist, who happened to have 4 legs and a tail, Emma's dark hair hung like curtains around her face, hiding the purple shadows under her eyes, shadows that had nothing to do with lack of sleep, and everything to do with the fist that had connected with her cheekbone 3 months ago. The bruises had healed, but the invisible wounds ran deeper than any physical mark Marcus Webb had ever left on her young body. District Attorney Sarah Chen sat across from them, her usually confident demeanor cracked with desperation. She had prosecuted hundreds of cases in her 15-year career, had faced down murderers and drug kingpins without flinching, but this trembling child represented her greatest challenge yet. Without Emma's testimony, Marcus Webb, the monster who had systematically destroyed the Martinez family, would walk free in less than 24 hours. "Emma, I know this is terrifying," Chen said softly, leaning forward in her chair. "But you're the only one who witnessed what really happened that night. Your mother was unconscious upstairs. After she paused, choosing her words carefully, after he hurt her. You're our only hope of stopping him from hurting other families." Emma's lips parted slightly, a whisper of air escaping, but no words came. It was the same devastating silence that had greeted every attempt to get her story for the past 3 months. Therapists, social workers, victim advocates all had tried and failed to unlock the secrets trapped inside this brave little girl's traumatized mind. But Emma did have secrets. Terrible, powerful secrets that could send Marcus Webb to prison for the rest of his life. Hidden in her bedroom closet, wrapped in her old baby blanket, was a small digital recorder, a Christmas gift from her grandmother that Emma had forgotten about until that horrible night in November. She had been hiding in the hallway, watching through a crack in the door as Webb ransacked her mother's home office, burning financial documents in their backyard fire pit. But the recording device had captured something far more damning than financial crimes. In Webb's drunken rage that night, he had confessed to crimes that made embezzlement look like shoplifting candy. He had bragged about his perfect system for controlling women, about the accidents that befell those who tried to leave him. Most chillingly, he had laughed about his first wife, Sarah Webb, who had mysteriously disappeared 3 years ago after threatening to expose his business dealings. She thought she was so smart. Going to the police, Webb had slurred into the darkness, unaware that a terrified 12-year-old was recording every word. But accidents happen to smart women. They fall downstairs, they drive off cliffs, they disappear, and nobody ever finds the bodies. Emma had nearly dropped the recorder when she heard those words. Marcus Webb wasn't just a thief, he was a killer. And if she testified against him, if she revealed what she knew, would she become his next accident? The fear had stolen her voice as surely as if Webb had wrapped his hands around her throat every time she tried to speak about that night. Her vocal cords seized up, her chest tightened, and the world began to spin. The trauma had created a prison in her own mind, and Webb's daily threatening letters from jail slipped to her. Through his criminal friends on the outside kept reinforcing the bars. "Your mom won't always be there to protect you," one letter had read. "Little girls who tell lies have very short lives." Justice shifted beside her chair, and Emma's attention was drawn to the magnificent dog who had become her constant companion. Over the past 2 weeks, Officer Rebecca Torres, his handler, had explained that Justice was no ordinary therapy dog. He was a highly trained facility dog, specifically educated to work within the legal system to help traumatized witnesses find their courage. He's helped over 50 children testify in cases just like yours, Torres had told her during their first meeting. Some were scared of their attackers. Some couldn't remember what happened, and some like you had lost their voices entirely. But Justice has a way of giving people strength they didn't know they had. Emma reached out tentatively and placed her hand on Justice's warm, soft head. The dog didn't move, but she could feel his steady heartbeat, his calm breathing, his absolute presence in the moment. For just an instant, the crushing weight of terror lifted from her chest. District Attorney Chen watched this interaction with growing hope. "Emma, I know you have something important to tell us. I can see it in your eyes." Whatever you're carrying inside, Justice and I are here to help you find the courage to share it." Emma's throat worked soundlessly, and for a moment, Chen thought she might speak, but then Emma's gaze drifted to the window, where she could see the county jail looming in the distance. Somewhere behind those walls, Marcus Webb was probably planning his celebration dinner for tomorrow night, confident that his campaign of terror had succeeded in silencing the only witness who could destroy him. What Webb didn't know was that Emma Martinez was about to become his worst nightmare, and Justice was going to show her exactly how to fight back. Officer Rebecca Torres had seen enough broken children in her 12 years, working with the courthouse therapy dog program to recognize the signs immediately. Emma Martinez wasn't just scared, she was drowning in trauma so deep that her body had essentially shut down its ability to communicate. But Rebecca had also learned something else in her years of service. Sometimes the most damaged witnesses became the most powerful voices for justice. Once they found their courage, the mock courtroom in the courthouse basement looked exactly like the real thing 3 floors above, complete with witness stand, jury box, and judge's bench. Rebecca had spent countless hours in this practice space with traumatized witnesses. But something about Emma's case felt different. The girl carried herself like someone harboring an explosive secret, and Justice's reaction to her had been unprecedented. In their first meeting, the usually calm golden retriever had immediately moved to Emma's side and refused to leave, as if sensing she carried invisible wounds that needed constant tending. "Emma, I want to show you something that might change everything," Rebecca said, settling into the witness chair with Justice beside her. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the basement windows, casting long shadows across the empty courtroom. "What I'm about to teach you isn't just training, it's a secret language that only you and Justice will understand." Emma looked up from her lap for the first time that day, curiosity flickering in her dark eyes like a candle flame threatening to ignite. Rebecca smiled mysteriously. "Every person who faces a monster in court needs a secret weapon. Some people have brilliant lawyers, some have overwhelming evidence, and some like you have something far more powerful." She gestured to Justice, who was watching Emma with laser focus. "You have a partner who can read your soul and respond to your needs without saying a single word." She demonstrated the first signal, pressing her palm flat against her chest and holding it there for 3 seconds. Justice immediately responded, moving closer and gently resting his substantial head on her lap. The weight was considerable, nearly 15 pounds of warm, living comfort that seemed to anchor Rebecca to the earth itself. "This is called deep pressure therapy," Rebecca explained, her voice taking on the tone of someone sharing sacred knowledge. "When your heart is racing, when you can't breathe, when the world feels like it's spinning out of control, this signal tells Justice to become your anchor. His weight will slow your heart rate, regulate your breathing, and remind your nervous system that you're safe." Emma's eyes widened as she watched the interaction. She had never seen anything like it, the way Justice seemed to understand exactly what Rebecca needed and provided it without hesitation. "But that's not all," Rebecca continued, her smile becoming positively conspiratorial. "Watch this." She made a small, subtle circular motion with her index finger. Barely visible to anyone watching, Justice immediately stood and repositioned himself, creating a physical barrier between Rebecca and an imaginary threat. His body language shifted from gentle therapy dog to protective guardian, though he remained completely calm and controlled. "This is your shield command," Rebecca whispered. "If someone in that courtroom tries to intimidate you, if their stare feels like it's burning holes through you, if you need Justice to block their view of you completely, this signal creates an invisible wall of protection." Emma leaned forward, fascination overcoming her fear for the first time in months. She had spent so many nights lying awake, terrified that Marcus Webb's eyes would find her in the courtroom and steal her voice again. But the idea that she could have a protector, a secret ally who would respond to her silent commands, was revolutionary. "There's more," Rebecca said, noting Emma's growing interest. "Justice has been trained in what we call threat assessment. He can read micro-expressions, body language, and stress signals that humans miss. If someone in that courtroom is trying to intimidate you in ways the judge can't see, Justice will notice, and if necessary, he'll act on that information." She pulled out a thick folder filled with photographs and testimonials. "I want to show you something, Emma. These are pictures of 53 children who sat exactly where you're sitting now. Children who thought they were too scared to speak, too broken to fight back, too small to face their monsters." She flipped through image after image, boys and girls of various ages, all with justice by their sides, all with expressions of newfound strength and determination. This is Marcus Thompson. Age 14, Rebecca said, pointing to a photograph of a tall, lanky boy with his arm around Justice. His stepfather had been abusing him for 6 years and threatened to kill his little sister if he ever testified. Marcus was completely silent for 8 months, couldn't say a word to anyone about what happened. But after 3 weeks of training with Justice, he found his voice. His stepfather got life in prison without parole. She turned to another photo. Sarah Chen, yes, the same Sarah Chen who's your prosecutor now. She was 9 years old when her uncle assaulted her. Justice helped her testify, as she was so inspired by the experience that she became a prosecutor herself, dedicated to helping children find justice. Emma's hands trembled as she reached out to touch the photographs. These children looked just like her, scared, broken, desperate. But in every image with Justice, their faces showed something else entirely: hope. The secret isn't magic, Emma, Rebecca said softly. It's partnership. Justice doesn't make you brave, he reminds you that the bravery was inside you all along. These signals, this training, it's just a way to unlock what's already there. Emma finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper, but audible for the first time in weeks. Will you teach me? Rebecca's smile could have powered the entire courthouse. Let's begin. The Denver District Courthouse stood like a fortress of justice against the gray February sky. Its imposing stone columns and towering windows designed to intimidate criminals and reassure victims. But as Emma Martinez walked through the metal detectors at 8:30 a.m. on Tuesday morning, the building felt more like a gladiator arena where she was about to face a lion. With nothing but her courage and a golden retriever for protection, Justice walked beside her with the confident stride of a professional, his specially designed courthouse vest clearly marking him as a working facility dog. The vest bore patches reading Courthouse Therapy Dog Do Not Pet and Working, but Emma noticed how people's faces softened when they saw him. Even the hard-faced bailiff smiled slightly as Justice passed, his presence somehow making the harsh courthouse environment feel more humane. The courtroom itself was larger than Emma had imagined, despite her practice sessions in the mock version. Downstairs, gallery benches stretched back in rows like church pews, already filling with spectators, reporters, and family members from both sides of the case. The morning light streaming through tall windows illuminated particles of dust dancing in the air, giving the space an almost ethereal quality that belied the brutal drama about to unfold. Emma took her designated seat in the front row behind the prosecution table, Justice settling beside her with practiced ease. That's when she saw him. Marcus Webb sat at the defense table, wearing an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than her mother's monthly rent. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his beard neatly trimmed, and his posture projected the confidence of a successful businessman who had been wrongfully accused. To anyone who didn't know better, he looked like the victim of a terrible mistake. But Emma knew better. She saw past the carefully constructed facade to the monster underneath, the man who had beaten her mother unconscious, who had stolen their family's dreams, who had whispered death threats in the darkness. When Webb turned in his chair and spotted Emma in the gallery, his transformation was subtle, but terrifying. His businessman smile never wavered, but his eyes became the cold, dead stare of a predator who had just spotted his prey. Webb's lips curved upward in what looked like a friendly acknowledgement to observers. But Emma could read the real message in his expression. You're dead if you say one word. All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Hawkins presiding. The bailiff's voice boomed through the courtroom, and everyone stood as Judge Hawkins entered. She was a formidable woman in her 60s, known throughout Colorado for her experience with cases involving domestic violence and child witnesses. Her reputation for protecting vulnerable victims while ensuring fair trials had made her the perfect choice for this high-profile case. District Attorney Sarah Chen stood to deliver her opening statement, her voice carrying the weight of justice itself. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, over the next few days, you will hear evidence of a systematic campaign of terror, theft, and violence perpetrated by the defendant against the Martinez family. Marcus Webb didn't just steal money, he stole their security, their peace, their very sense of safety in their own home. Chen paced before the jury box with measured steps, her presence commanding attention. The evidence will show that Mr. Webb embezzled $4,000 to $7,000 from Maria Martinez's restaurant. Over an 8-month period, he forged checks, manipulated accounting records, And when Mrs. Martinez began to discover his crimes, he escalated to physical violence to maintain control. Emma watched the jurors' faces as Chen spoke. Some looked skeptical, others appeared engaged, but all seemed to be listening carefully. She wondered what they would think when they learned about the recording hidden in her closet, the evidence that could transform this case from simple embezzlement to potential murder charges. But the financial crimes were only the beginning. Chen continued, her voice rising with controlled passion. When Maria Martinez threatened to leave him and report his theft to authorities, Marcus Webb showed his true nature. He beat her so severely that she lost consciousness and required hospitalization, and then, believing he had silenced the only adult witness to his crimes, he made a crucial mistake. Chen turned to look directly at Emma, and Emma felt the weight of dozens of eyes following her gaze. He forgot about 12-year-old Emma Martinez, who witnessed everything. Defense attorney Michael Brennan rose for his opening statement, and Emma immediately disliked him. He had Webb's same cold smile and predatory confidence, though wrapped in expensive legal training. Ladies and gentlemen, my client Marcus Webb is not the monster the prosecution wants you to believe he is. He's a successful businessman who tried to help a struggling restaurant owner manage her finances. Brennan gestured dismissively toward the prosecution table. The state's case relies entirely on the testimony of a traumatized child who has been coached by her mother and influenced by biased investigators. Emma Martinez has been unable to provide consistent statements about what allegedly happened, and for good reason, because nothing criminal occurred. Emma felt her chest tighten as Brennan continued his attack on her credibility, but then Webb made his first mistake of the day. Thinking the judge wasn't looking, he turned to stare directly at Emma and slowly, deliberately, drew his finger across his throat in an unmistakable slashing motion. His lips formed a single, silent word, dead. Justice immediately sensed Emma's spike in terror. The dog's ears perked up, and he shifted position to get a better view of Webb, his professional training kicking in as he assessed the potential threat. Emma's breathing became shallow, her hands began to shake, and she could feel the familiar paralysis creeping up her throat. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't alone. The defense calls for Emma Martinez to take the stand immediately. Brennan announced with calculated cruelty, hoping to break her before she could prepare. We want to hear what this young lady has to say about these serious accusations. Judge Hawkins frowned at the unusual request, but reluctantly agreed. The witness will take the stand. Emma's legs felt like water as she stood, but Justice rose beside her, ready to walk into battle. As they moved toward the witness stand, Webb's stare felt like acid burning through her soul. But for the first time in months, Emma wasn't facing her monster alone. The real fight was about to begin. The 20-foot walk from the gallery to the witness stand felt like crossing the battlefield under enemy fire. Emma's legs trembled with each step as Justice padded silently beside her, his professional demeanor masking the heightened alertness she could feel radiating from his powerful frame. The courtroom had fallen into absolute silence, broken only by the soft click of Justice's nails on the polished marble floor, and the thunderous beating of Emma's heart in her ears died as they approached the witness stand. Defense attorney Michael Brennan leaped to his feet like a predator sensing weakness. Your Honor, I must object to this theatrical display. His voice boomed through the courtroom with calculated outrage. The defense moves to exclude this emotional manipulation device. Masquerading as a therapy animal, this dog serves no purpose except to generate unwarranted sympathy for a witness whose credibility is already questionable. Brennan's words hit Emma like physical blows. She froze halfway to the witness stand, her breath catching as the lawyer's hostile energy washed over her. Justice immediately responded to her distress, positioning himself slightly between Emma and Brennan while maintaining his professional composure. Judge Hawkins's eyes flashed with steel as she leaned forward in her chair. Mr. Brennan, I suggest you familiarize yourself with Colorado Revised Statute Section 1610402. Which explicitly allows facility dogs to assist witnesses under 18 in criminal proceedings. This dog stays, and if you object again without legal grounds, I'll hold you in contempt. The judge's rebuke sent a ripple of satisfaction through the prosecution side of the courtroom, but Emma barely heard it. All her attention was focused on Marcus Webb, who sat at the defense table with the satisfied smile of a cat watching a mouse stumble into its trap. He leaned back in his chair with casual confidence, knowing that the real psychological warfare was just beginning. Emma reached the witness stand on unsteady legs and took the oath with a voice so soft the court reporter had to ask her to repeat herself twice as she settled into the chair. Justice positioned himself in the designated spot beside the witness stand, close enough to provide comfort, but not so close as to interfere with the proceedings. The golden retriever's calm presence was the only thing keeping Emma from bolting from the courtroom entirely. District Attorney Sarah Chen approached with gentle authority, her movements deliberately slow and non-threatening. Emma, I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell the jury what you witnessed on the night of November 15th. Can you start by describing where you were when you first heard the argument downstairs? Emma's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. She tried again, managing a whisper so faint that Judge Hawkins had to instruct her to speak louder. I was in my room doing homework when I heard Mom screaming. Webb's eyes locked onto Emma's like laser beams, and he began his campaign of silent intimidation. When Judge Hawkins looked down at her notes, Webb subtly pointed at Emma and drew his finger across his throat when the judge's attention was elsewhere. He mouthed the word liar with exaggerated lip movements. Each gesture was perfectly timed to avoid detection by the court officials, but clearly visible to his target. What happened next, Emma? Chen prompted gently. I went to the top of the stairs and looked down, Emma managed, her voice growing smaller with each word. I saw him hitting her. She fell down and didn't get up. Her breathing became rapid and shallow as the memories crashed over her like tsunami waves. Webb escalated his psychological assault, leaning forward in his chair. When the judge turned to speak with the court clerk, he made a subtle slashing motion with his pen, then pointed directly at Emma's mother in the gallery. The message was clear: talk, and she's next. Justice sensed the dramatic increase in Emma's stress levels. His ears perked forward, and he shifted slightly in his position, his professional training engaging as he assessed the threat level in the room. The dog's movements were subtle, but Officer Rebecca Torres, watching from the back of the courtroom, noticed immediately Justice was preparing to act. Emma, after your mother fell, what did you see Mr. Webb do? Chen asked, her own voice tight with concern as she watched Emma's deteriorating condition. Emma's vision began to blur as panic set in. Webb was now making increasingly bold, threatening gestures, pointing at her, making cutting motions, mouthing words like dead and accident. The courtroom began to spin around her as hyperventilation took hold. I can't, Emma gasped, her hands gripping the arms of the witness chair until her knuckles went white. I can't breathe. Defense attorney Brennan sensed blood in the water. Your Honor, the witness is clearly emotionally unstable and unable to provide reliable testimony. I move to dismiss all charges based on the prosecution's failure to present competent evidence. Judge Hawkins held up a hand to silence him, her experienced eyes recognizing the signs of a witness being intimidated. She looked carefully around the courtroom, but Webb had perfect timing. Every threatening gesture had been made. When her attention was elsewhere, Emma's breathing became ragged gasps as full panic set in. The walls of the courtroom seemed to be closing in. Webb's threatening stare felt like it was burning holes through her soul, and the weight of everyone's expectations pressed down on her like a physical force. She was drowning in terror, and Webb's satisfied smile told her he knew exactly what he was doing. Justice whined softly, sensing his partner's distress, but waiting for the signal he had been trained to recognize. Emma's training with Officer Torres seemed like a distant dream as panic consumed her ability to think clearly. I need a recess, Judge Hawkins announced, recognizing that the young witness was on the verge of complete breakdown. Court will reconvene in 15 minutes. As the courtroom began to empty, Webb stood slowly and turned to face Emma directly. With most people filing out and thinking himself unobserved, he made his most brazen threat yet, pointing at Emma, then making an unmistakable slashing motion across his throat, while mouthing the words, "You're dead, little girl." But this time, Webb made a crucial mistake. Justice saw everything. The victim services room felt like a sanctuary compared to the gladiator arena of the courtroom. Emma sat hunched in a chair, her small body racked with tremors as Officer Rebecca Torres knelt beside her, speaking in low, urgent tones. Justice pressed against Emma's legs, his warm weight the only thing anchoring her to reality as her world threatened to spin completely out of control. Emma, listen to me, Torres whispered, her hands gentle on the girl's shoulders. I saw what happened. In there, I saw him threatening you when the judge wasn't looking. Justice saw it too. Look at him. Emma glanced down at Justice, whose typically calm demeanor had shifted into something she'd never seen before. His ears were alert, his eyes sharp and focused, and there was a tension in his muscles that spoke of barely contained protective instincts. The gentle therapy dog had transformed into something more primal, a guardian recognizing a genuine threat to his charge. He's ready to protect you, Emma, but you have to let him. You have to remember your training. Torres's voice carried desperate hope. The signals we practice, they're not just comfort techniques. They're your weapons against fear. Webb thinks he's winning, but he doesn't know about your secret language with Justice. Through the small window in the door, Emma could see the courtroom filling up again as the recess ended. Webb was back at the defense table, chatting casually with his attorney as if he hadn't just spent 15 minutes terrorizing a 12-year-old witness. His confidence was absolute. He believed he had broken her completely. The bailiff knocked on the door. Time to resume, folks. Emma's legs nearly gave out as she stood, but Justice immediately flanked her, his presence radiating strength and determination. As they walked back toward the witness stand, Emma caught sight of her mother in the gallery. Maria Martinez looked pale and desperate, her hands clasped in prayer as she watched her daughter prepare to face the monster who had destroyed their family. But something else caught Emma's attention, a small group of people in the back row who hadn't been there before. She recognized some of the faces from the photographs Officer Torres had shown her, other children who had testified with Justice's help, now grown up and returned to support another brave witness. Among them sat a woman Emma realized must be Sarah Chen's younger sister, who had also been helped by Justice years ago. They were all there, a silent army of survivors, proof that courage could triumph over terror. Emma took her place at the witness stand with renewed determination. Justice settling beside her with professional precision, defense attorney Brennan rose like a vulture sensing carrion, his smile predatory as he prepared to deliver what he expected would be the killing blow to the prosecution's case. Miss Martinez, Brennan began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. I understand you've been through a traumatic experience, but isn't it true that you've been coached by your mother and the prosecution to say these terrible things about my client? The attack was brutal and immediate. Brennan didn't ease into his cross-examination. He went straight for Emma's throat, accusing her of lying to help her mother frame an innocent man. Isn't it true that you resent Mr. Webb because he tried to discipline you when you misbehaved? Emma's breath caught in her throat. The word discipline was Webb's code word for violence, and hearing it spoken aloud in court felt like being slapped. Her vision began to tunnel as panic set in again. Webb leaned forward in his chair, sensing victory. When Judge Hawkins briefly consulted with the court clerk, he made his most vicious threat yet. He pointed directly at Emma, then at her mother, in the gallery, then drew his finger across his throat while mouthing the words, both of you. But then Emma remembered Torres's words. These signals are your weapons against fear. With trembling fingers, Emma pressed her palm flat against her chest, the signal she and Justice had practiced dozens of times in the basement training room. Justice responded instantly, rising from his position and moving to place his head gently on her lap. The 15 pounds of warm, living comfort immediately began working its magic, slowing her racing heart and regulating her breathing. The transformation was visible to everyone in the courtroom. Emma's posture straightened, her breathing steadied, and for the first time since taking the stand, she looked directly at Brennan instead of cowering. I'm not lying, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom, and I wasn't misbehaving. He hit me because I saw him stealing from my mom's restaurant. Webb's confident expression flickered with the first hint of concern. This wasn't going according to his plan. Brennan, sensing his advantage slipping, escalated his attack. Young lady, you expect this jury to believe that a successful businessman like my client would risk everything to steal from a small restaurant? That's absurd. Emma felt another wave of fear rising, but this time she was ready. With Justice's calming presence giving her strength, she made the subtle circular motion with her finger that Torres had taught her. Justice immediately repositioned himself, creating a physical barrier between Emma and Webb while maintaining his therapeutic contact. The effect was electric. With Justice shielding her from Webb's intimidating stare, Emma found her voice growing stronger. He didn't think it was a risk, she said, her words ringing with truth. He told me Mom would never figure it out because she trusted him. He said women were stupid and easy to control. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as Emma's testimony gained momentum. But Webb was far from finished. His carefully constructed Facade was beginning to crack, and desperation was making him dangerous. What happened next would change everything. The atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted like the air before a lightning strike. Emma's newfound confidence rippled through the gallery, and for the first time since the trial began, Marcus Webb looked genuinely rattled. His carefully constructed businessman facade was developing cracks, and desperation leaked through like poison from a broken container. District Attorney Sarah Chen rose for redirect examination, her movements purposeful as she approached the witness stand. She had prosecuted hundreds of cases, but something electric was happening here, something that could transform this routine domestic violence case into something far more significant. Emma, you mentioned that Mr. Webb told you women were stupid and easy to control, Chen said, her voice gentle but probing. Did he ever talk about other women he had controlled? Emma felt Webb's stare burning into her like acid, but Justice's warm weight against her leg reminded her she wasn't facing this monster alone. The secret weapon Rebecca Torres had given her was working. The deep pressure therapy had regulated her nervous system, and the shield formation kept Webb's intimidating presence at bay. He talked about his first wife, Emma said, her voice growing stronger with each word. He said she thought she was smart, but he proved her wrong. Defense attorney Brennan shot to his feet. Objection. Hearsay, Your Honor, and completely irrelevant to the charges at hand. Judge Hawkins studied Emma carefully. I'll allow it. The witness may continue. Webb's face had gone ashen. He leaned forward, making increasingly frantic, threatening gestures when he thought no one was looking. But his desperation was making him careless, his movements more obvious and his timing off. What exactly did Mr. Webb say about his first wife? Chen pressed. Emma closed her eyes, remembering that horrible night when she had hidden in the hallway with her grandmother's digital recorder. The memory was seared into her brain like a brand. Webb's drunken confession that had revealed him to be something far worse than a thief. He said she had an accident, Emma whispered, then found her strength again. But then he laughed and said it wasn't really an accident. He said women who tried to leave him had a way of disappearing. The courtroom exploded in gasps and murmurs. Several jurors leaned forward, their expression shifting from skeptical to horrified. In the gallery, Emma caught sight of a woman she didn't recognize, a tall blonde who was crying silently. Later, Emma would learn this was Sarah Webb's sister, who had been searching for answers about her siblings' disappearance for 3 years. Webb's control finally snapped. He stood up partially from his chair, pointing directly at Emma while his lawyer tried to pull him back down. She's lying, he shouted, his voice cracking with rage. That little bitch is making it all up. Mr. Webb, sit down, Judge Hawkins commanded, her gavel striking like thunder. But Webb was beyond reason now. Years of careful manipulation and control were unraveling in real time, and his true nature was emerging like a monster crawling out of a cave. He began making increasingly bold, threatening gestures, pointing at Emma, then at her mother, making slashing motions across his throat. Justice's training kicked into overdrive. The golden retriever's head came up, his ears pricked forward, and every muscle in his body tensed as he assessed the escalating threat. This was no longer subtle intimidation. This was an active threat display that triggered every protective instinct the dog possessed. Chen saw her opportunity and seized it. Emma, I know this is difficult, but there's something else you need to tell the jury, isn't there? Something you've been keeping secret because you were afraid? Emma's heart pounded as she realized the moment of truth had arrived. The digital recorder hidden in her closet contained evidence that could send Webb away forever, but revealing it would also paint an even bigger target on her back. With Justice's calming presence flowing through her like strength from a hidden wellspring, Emma made her decision. She pressed her palm against her chest again, trying even more deep pressure therapy from her canine partner. Justice responded immediately, his weight shifting to provide maximum therapeutic contact. I recorded him, Emma said, her voice cutting through the courtroom silence like a sword. The night he hurt my mom, I had my recorder with me. I got everything. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Webb's face went from pale to purple with rage, and he began shouting incoherently while his lawyer desperately tried to control him. Brennan was on his feet, objecting to everything and nothing, his carefully planned defense strategy crumbling in real time. But Webb's fury had completely overridden his survival instincts. He was now openly threatening Emma, pointing at her and making unmistakable throat-cutting gestures while screaming, "You little lying bitch, I'll kill you, I'll kill your whole family." Bailiff, restrain the defendant, Judge Hawkins ordered. But Webb's breakdown was far from overdone in his rage-fueled state. Webb made the crucial mistake that would seal his fate forever. As bailiffs moved toward him, he spotted Justice watching him with intense focus. And something in the dog's steady gaze triggered a complete psychological collapse. "That damn dog!" Webb screamed, his voice echoing through the courtroom. "That damn dog knows I killed Sarah. But you can't prove anything because I burned." He stopped mid-sentence, his face draining of all color as he realized what he had just confessed. In front of a packed courtroom, 12 jurors and a court reporter, documenting every word, the silence that followed was deafening. Webb stood frozen, his mouth still open, staring at the faces around him as the magnitude of his mistake sank in. Justice remained perfectly still, his intelligent brown eyes fixed on the man who had just destroyed himself with his own words. Emma felt a surge of triumph mixed with terror. Her secret weapon hadn't just given her courage, it had exposed the killer. The silence in the courtroom stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Marcus Webb stood frozen at the defense table, his face a mask of dawning horror as the weight of his accidental confession crashed down on him. The words "I killed Sarah" hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot, impossible to take back, witnessed by dozens of people, and permanently recorded in the court transcript. Justice remained motionless beside Emma's chair, but every person in the courtroom could sense the change in the golden retriever. His ears were pinned forward, his body coiled with tension, and his dark eyes never left Webb's face. Years of specialized training had taught Justice to read human behavior with uncanny accuracy, and right now, every instinct was screaming that the man across the room was a lethal threat to his partner. Judge Patricia Hawkins was the first to break the spell. Her gavel crashed down like thunder, the sound echoing through the stunned courtroom. "Mr. Webb, you will sit down immediately, or I will have you removed from this courtroom." But Webb was beyond hearing judicial commands. His carefully constructed world of lies and manipulation had just collapsed in spectacular fashion, and his reptilian brain had taken over. 3 years of believing he had committed the perfect murder, 3 years of freedom and confidence had just evaporated in a single moment of rage-induced stupidity. "You can't use that," Webb screamed, spittle flying from his lips as he pointed accusingly at Emma. "She's a lying little bitch who's been coached. That recording is illegal. She's just a kid." Defense attorney Michael Brennan looked like a man watching his career implode in real time. He was frantically gesturing for Webb to shut up, but his client was completely beyond reason. Brennan had built his reputation on defending the indefensible, but even he couldn't work magic when his client confessed to murder in open court. Emma felt a surge of power she had never experienced before. For months, she had been Webb's victim, cowering in fear of his threats and violence. But now, sitting in the witness stand with Justice's steadying presence beside her, she realized that she held all the cards. Webb had just destroyed himself with his own words, and there was no lawyer skilled enough to put that particular genie back in the bottle. District Attorney Sarah Chan moved with the predatory grace of a prosecutor who had just been handed the case of her career. "Your Honor, I request an immediate recess to confer with the Colorado State Police regarding Mr. Webb's statement about Sarah Webb's death." "I didn't say anything about Sarah's death," Webb shrieked, but his panicked denial only made his situation worse. Everyone in the courtroom had heard his confession, and his attempts to backtrack were only digging his grave deeper. Judge Hawkins turned to the court reporter. "Please read back Mr. Webb's exact words from 30 seconds ago." The court reporter's voice was steady and professional as she read from her transcript. "That damn dog knows I killed Sarah, but you can't prove anything because I burned. That's not what I said." Webb's voice cracked like a teenager's as desperation consumed him. I meant something else. That dog is making me say crazy things." Justice chose that moment to do something that would be talked about in Colorado legal circles for years to come. The golden retriever rose smoothly from his position beside Emma and walked with deliberate purpose directly toward Webb. Every eye in the courtroom followed the dog's movement. As he crossed the well of the court, his gait confident and determined, Webb stumbled backward, knocking over his chair as Justice approached. "Get that thing away from me," he screamed. "It knows. The dog knows what I did." Justice sat down approximately 6 feet from Webb and simply stared at him. There was nothing aggressive in the dog's posture. He wasn't growling. His hackles weren't raised, and his tail wasn't rigid. He simply sat and watched Webb with the steady, unwavering gaze of a witness who had seen everything. But for Webb, That calm stare was more terrifying than any snarling attack could have been. In his guilt-ridden, paranoid mind, Justice's intelligent eyes seemed to see straight through to his black soul. The dog had witnessed his threatening gestures, had seen his true nature emerge, and now sat in judgment like a four-legged embodiment of justice itself. It was all her fault. Webb suddenly screamed, pointing wildly at a woman in the gallery who had been crying quietly. Sarah threatened to go to the police about the business. She was going to ruin everything. I had to stop her. The blonde woman, Sarah Webb's sister, let out a strangled sob and collapsed into the arms of the person beside her. After 3 years of wondering what had happened to her sister, she finally had her answer. She wouldn't shut up. Webb continued, his manic confession, completely oblivious to the legal catastrophe he was creating. She found the books, found the money I'd moved around, said she was going to the FBI. I couldn't let her destroy me. Bailiffs were moving toward Webb now, but he seemed trapped in a confessional trance, words pouring out of him like blood from a severed artery. It was supposed to look like an accident. The car went off the cliff road, but they never found her body because I moved it first. I buried her in the mountains where nobody would ever look. Judge Hawkins's gavel was pounding continuously now, but nothing could stop Webb's psychological collapse. 3 years of buried guilt and paranoia had erupted like a volcano, and he was telling the entire courtroom exactly how he had murdered his first wife. Justice never moved from his spot, never broke his steady gaze, but everyone in the courtroom could sense that the dog understood the significance of what was happening. This wasn't just a therapy session anymore, this was a reckoning. This trial is hereby suspended. Judge Hawkins announced over the chaos, bailiffs, take Mr. Webb into custody immediately. Court is adjourned pending a full investigation into these new allegations as handcuffs clicked around Webb's wrists. He looked back at Justice one last time. The dog, who had started the day as Emma's support animal, had become the catalyst for exposing a killer. 6 months after Marcus Webb's spectacular courtroom confession, the Colorado mountain air carried the scent of pine and possibility as Emma Martinez stood before a crowd of legal professionals, victim advocates, and survivors at the state capitol building. The girl who had once been too terrified to speak now held a microphone with steady hands, her voice clear and strong as she addressed the assembled crowd. My name is Emma Martinez, and I'm here to tell you that courage is in the absence of fear, it's finding your voice. Despite the terror trying to silence you, beside her on the podium sat Justice, now wearing a special ceremonial collar that gleamed gold in the afternoon sunlight. The governor herself had presented the golden retriever with the Colorado Medal of Valor just minutes earlier, making him the first therapy dog in state history to receive the honor. But Justice seemed more interested in watching Emma than in the accolades. His dark eyes filled with the quiet pride of a partner who had helped transform a broken child into a powerful advocate. The investigation that followed Webb's confession had been swift and thorough. Within days of his courtroom breakdown, Colorado State Police had used his detailed directions to locate Sarah Webb's remains in a remote mountain grave exactly where he had described. Forensic evidence confirmed every detail of his confession, and additional evidence found in his storage unit revealed a pattern of financial manipulation and violence that stretched back over a decade. The digital recorder that Emma had finally turned over to authorities contained over 40 minutes of Webb's drunken confessions from that horrible November night. His voice, preserved in crystal clarity, detailed not only the murder of his first wife, but also his systematic campaign to terrorize and control Emma's family. The recording became the cornerstone of a prosecution that resulted in a life sentence, without the possibility of parole. But Webb's conviction was only the beginning of the story that had captured national attention. Emma's courage in the face of intimidation, combined with Justice's unprecedented intervention, had sparked a revolution in how the legal system approached cases involving traumatized witnesses. Standing at the podium, Emma looked out at faces that had become familiar over the past month. Sarah Webb's sister, who had become like a second aunt to Emma, Officer Rebecca Torres, whose revolutionary training methods were now being implemented in courthouses across the country, and dozens of survivors who had found their own voices through Emma's example. When I first met Justice, I thought he was just a dog who would sit with me while I testified, Emma continued, her words carrying to the back of the crowd through the sound system. I didn't understand that he wasn't just there to comfort me. He was there to help me remember that I had power I didn't know existed. The transformation in Emma was visible to everyone who had known her before the trial. The trembling, silent child had evolved into a confident young woman who spoke at conferences, testified before legislative committees, and had already helped establish 3 new courthouse therapy dog programs across Colorado. Her mother Maria's restaurant had not only recovered, but expanded into a second location, and they had established a foundation to help other families devastated by domestic violence. District Attorney Sarah Chen, now running for Attorney General on a platform of victim advocacy reform, stepped to the microphone. Emma Martinez didn't just help convict the killer, she revolutionized how we think about supporting vulnerable witnesses. The Martinez Protocol, named in her honor, is now being implemented in juvenile courts across 12 states. The Martinez Protocol was a comprehensive system that combines specialized therapy dog training, witness preparation techniques, and courtroom modifications designed to protect intimidated witnesses while preserving defendants' rights. The protocol had already resulted in successful prosecutions in cases that might otherwise have failed due to witness intimidation. Justice's role in the protocol was particularly significant. His behavior during Webb's breakdown had been analyzed by animal behaviorists, legal experts, and law enforcement professionals. While no one could fully explain how the dog had seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, his actions had become a textbook example of how properly trained facility dogs could serve functions beyond simple emotional support. Dr. Michael Harrison, the lead researcher studying Justice's case for the American Bar Association, approached the microphone. What we witnessed in that Denver courtroom wasn't magic. It was the result of exceptional training, intuitive intelligence, and an unprecedented bond between a facility dog and his human partner. Justice didn't just provide comfort to Emma. He became an active participant in the pursuit of justice itself. As the ceremony concluded, Emma knelt beside Justice, her arms wrapped around his neck as cameras flashed around them. The bond between the girl and the dog had saved the lives of Emma's, and whatever future victims Webb might have claimed if he had remained free. "Thank you," Emma whispered into Justice's ear, words only he could hear. "Thank you for teaching me that monsters are just afraid people who forgot how to be human. And thank you for showing me that I was never as powerless as I thought." Justice's tail wagged slowly, and he pressed his head against Emma's shoulder in the gentle gesture that had become their signature move. Together, they had proven that sometimes the smallest voices, supported by the most unexpected allies, could topple giants and change the world. In the crowd, a dozen children who had been helped by courthouse therapy dogs since Emma's case stood with their families, each one carrying a piece of the courage that a 12-year-old girl and a golden retriever had shown them was possible. The ripple effects of one moment of bravery continued to spread, creating waves of justice that would reach far beyond anything Emma could have imagined. Webb's reign of terror was over, but Emma and Justice's legacy of courage was just beginning.